Hello, I'm your host Aria, and today we are covering Not Safe for Work. People who had no sex education at all and had never ever seen the opposite sex's special parts. How'd you know how sex worked, if you did at all? And which parts were supposed to go where? How did your first time go? Please consider subscribing if you like the video. When I was a kid, I thought sex was being under the bed sheets naked and make the bed rock while making noises. I cannot process how that made any sense to me then, but I just accepted that. I had only seen sex on TV, and of course on TV they never show them actually having sex, so I thought people just viciously tore their clothes off and then lay in bed naked. I remember learning from Peen that the testicles do not actually go in the vagina. Just glad I got that little tidbit sorted out before my big moment. Throw away cause this shit's freaking embarrassing. I was very sheltered. Like absolutely no movies with sex and even kissing scenes had to be skipped. Eyes averted. Always taught not to kiss until marriage. Sex was taboo, and to this day, I still have some irrational shame talking openly about it. The only people I socialized with at all were like me. Extremely sheltered and old-fashioned. A small town, small church, small school. Had sex ed, but it never actually taught us about sex. Just basic anatomy. I think it was 20 minutes once a year, only in grade 5 and 6. First time I got a boner, maybe 13, I don't know. But I thought the head of my dong was gonna fall off as soon as the foreskin pulled back behind that edge, and it freaked me out. I sat on the toilet for a good while just holding the foreskin forward until it went away on its own. First time I fapped I was I think 17. My dong was disgusting, because I had never done it before and never really played with my dong at all. And nobody told me anything about cleaning it. There was years of dong cheese, aka dead skin and all that stuff. That built up into a several thick layer under my foreskin. I don't remember a smell, but hard to imagine how there wasn't one. One night I had a boner randomly in bed and I got super annoyed and just looked at it. And a piece of this dong cheese was sticking out from the edge of the foreskin and starting to come off. So I just carefully, holy shit it was sensitive, peeled it off. Then some more, then some more. It felt amazing. Like peeling dried glue off your fingernails. Had sex with, well, having sex, and this was its baby. I eventually ran out of this nasty freaking shit to clean off. But by then I realized that moving the foreskin back and forth on my dong felt amazing. So I kept doing it. Then I sped up. Then I came. Then I knew. I had never come before then except from wet dreams. And I 100% was convinced I was sterile. So seeing that white stuff come out was almost better than the orgasm itself. The interesting thing is I'd been looking at Peen for years by that point. But somehow masturbation had never even crossed my mind. I just didn't know it was a thing people did. Someone at school asked me if I fapped in grade 9 and I didn't even know what the word meant, so I had to go home and look it up. And I tried a few different web searches. But all I found was that it's when guys put their peanuts between the mattress and box spring and thrust. Which I thought was super freaking weird and painful, and why do that? To this day, I have no idea how nothing more explicit came up on that Alta Vista search. But that's how I remember it. To this day, I'm actually pretty self-conscious about the whole thing. Like how freaking dense was I that I took so long to figure such a basic human exercise out? How disgusting is it that I didn't figure out how to clean my own dong? What the frick was I thinking about when I looked at all that Peen? Am I freaking autistic? Probably to some extent. A slightly unrelated story about my friend. I was a year older than her, and told her everything. Because I had discovered it. At 13, she was stunned, and in complete denial, and was about to go and tell my mom that I'd told her about sex. She kept saying, "This is disgusting. My parents could never do that. You're lying. I'm going to throw up." She was literally shaking, and took hours of convincing to get her to not tell my mom. I didn't know that I had to be wet. It was a bit awkward when I first decided to do it. But we took it nice and slow, and he was very understanding until the right day came. Farm kids learned by example unless exceptionally dense. I remember my little sister asking why the bull kept trying to jump over the cows. I grew up super duper religious. My mum didn't even really explain what my period was. I went to school and they provided information like sex ed and period education, but I never really got it. From the diagrams, I never figured a peanuts would get hard. So 4 years I honestly though that both people would lie on their backs and kinda Jenga their genitals together yoga style. But then I was like 14 and I found out that a peanut can go from soft to hard like what the frick? Is it a solid or a liquid? Turns out if you do it right, it's both. We learned in biology how reproductive organs work, but they didn't mention sex. They just spoke about each individually. I learned about sex from peen. I grew thinking all humans had penises. Like I was even shown a vagina one time and I thought they had tucked it in SMH. Didn't receive any proper sex ed classes at school or any talks from my parents. I just accidentally stumbled upon peen when I was really young, like in middle school, elementary school, and as I got older, I did research on the female vagina. Mainly just studied the diagrams and learned how everything worked. So you can say I self-taught myself. My first time was still pretty bad, but it could have been much worse. When I was 16, I was lucky enough to have a girlfriend as inexperienced as I was. All we knew was that we wanted to do naked, sexy stuff together. It took a few nights, but we figured it out. As a parent, I had to explain to my then 6 and 8-year-olds that no, sex isn't when a boy sticks his peanuts in a girl's butthole. They had a friend who told them that's what sex was, and I just imagined the poor children who never learn any different going into sex for the first time thinking it goes in the booty. We will explain it all in more detail at some point when they are a little older, but I just think they needed to know they weren't getting accurate information. I was homeschooled, raised with cattle, and fairly conservative Mormon parents who did not acknowledge sex. Having participated in several artificial insemination procedures by the age of 10, I thought for the longest time that pregnancy happened when an illiterate cowboy brought a teeny baby cow and shoved it up the ass of a mama cow. Or when one got married you requested a baby and a cowboy would show up at your door to shove it on up there. Luckily, we got the internet in 1998, and I finally learned that a woman got pregnant when a man with a mustache came on her face. Serious reply. I figured it out while shopping for hose connectors at Lowe's with Dad when I was maybe 10. I knew little more than boys have a peanuts, girls have a vagina a la kindergarten cop, male and female pieces, the male end goes into the female end, my inner voice goes, why do they call them male and female, oh, that makes sense. When I gave my first blowjob I didn't know what coming was or that it was a thing. Eventually I got pretty bored and stopped, so he told me, you're supposed to go until I finish, and I remember thinking that's rude, how am I supposed to know when you're finished? He didn't, and I learned what he meant about 6 months later, lol. An interesting story from history. Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI had a notoriously difficult time conceiving a child. They were married 4 years before it happened, even though both were seemingly fertile. There are a variety of theories as to why, but one is that they just didn't know what to do. As the story goes, Marie Antoinette's brother finally gave Louis the talk and they were able to conceive. In my country, parents don't really tell kids what sex is, so we just had to freaking discover it ourselves. The first time I heard it was when I was in 2nd grade, about 8 years old, and a classmate told me about it. As if it was a groundbreaking discovery. After that, things just escalated. When we reached the age of 11, puberty freaking smashed into our sexuality, and to this day, I wish my parents had told me what sex was. Because oh boy do I cringe at the things I did as a teen. Stick her with the pointy end. I understood how sex happens at 13 years of age when a girl whispered it in my ear. That was also the day I realized that I had a vagina. Needless to say, I was stunned. The first time I saw my boyfriend's peanuts, at 20, I was again quite surprised. I had never watched Peen and had been expecting something entirely different. So, even though I shied away at first, within 24 hours I was pretty pleased with it. First time sex was very painful, way more than expected. But second time was good. My boyfriend knew how things happen and I was very open about communicating. Honestly, I have had sex maybe 3 times without orgasm. Oh, and the boyfriend is my husband now. Oh my god, it was horrible. I would sincerely feel bad for my first boyfriend, but he was just as horrible back. Plus a jerk. I think it was a combination of us not having any idea about sex, both of our home computers being in common areas, us being raised Catholics, and him being a jerk and didn't like talking about it. Like so many things could have been better if we just talked. First time I stroke his dong. It was a bit too fast. He of course returned the favor by clawing the inside of my vagina with his freakish long nails. I licked his dong. Like legit licked. Thinking that was a blowjob, and he just insulted me without telling me how it was supposed to be done, so I think he didn't know either. He pushed himself in hole while I was dry. And was confused I hated sex. After several attempts, and it's still hurting, because I was dry every time, he wanted to do anal to avoid any chance of the birth control and condoms not working. Months of dry, all at one shove and dong anal. That hurt. Led to bleeding and diarrhea and gave me PTSD. Towards the end of the relationship, I tried begging for him to just stop. I'm pretty sure the horrible sex is why he dumped me. Luckily for me, I discovered sex as soon as we broke up, and it had never been painful again. So do your future stupid kids a favor and give them sex education. Somewhat related, but the first girl I started doing stuff with made me wear a condom while giving me a handjob. She made it out to seem to be the normal thing to do, and I guess it made sense, because it meant cum didn't go flying everywhere. However, it made things really awkward with the next girl I was with, and I pulled out a condom when she was playing with me. She was like, "Whoa, I'm not ready to have sex with you yet." And then I explained that I wasn't trying to mean that. She informed me that was a bit weird, and it totally killed the mood. I actually was on the other side. My first boyfriend came from a Catholic school without proper sex education. After I had to explain him that a woman can't get pregnant from petting, as long as no sperm is involved, I prepared a basic lecture about sex. I felt like his teacher. The first sex was acceptable, but not good, even with my sex education. I went to an ultra-religious school. I don't think the word sex was said once in all 12 years of school, except maybe during biology class. My knowledge of sex came from reading. Internet forums were really helpful actually, even just reading about other people's sex lives. I know that sounds creepy. I watched Peen, but I also had read enough to know it wasn't realistic. My first time was actually great. It was with my boyfriend, who I love and trust. We spent a few months without doing PIV sex, just oral and hand stuff while we learned each other's bodies better and until we both felt ready. And when we finally were, it was wonderful. I used to have panic attacks pretty often in the beginning due to trauma and also the way super religious places frick up your mindset about sex. And he would just stop and hold me for as long as I needed. The first time, he insisted that I be on top so that I feel in control, and if it hurts or I am panicking I can just stop. He is an amazing man, and I am so glad my first time was with him. My first time was a little awkward. I grew up without internet and was homeschooled by my southern grandparents, so sex wasn't taught at all. I had deduced that the vagina was on the front, roughly equal to where the peanuts is on a male. I also had no clue that female nipples were larger than a male's. My first time was with a woman in her 30s and I was 17. She basically had to walk me through every step and had to put up with tons of looking and asking questions. I knew what it looked like from my brother's stack of dirty pictures, but I still wasn't knowledgeable of the specifics. I was a virgin on my wedding night, because we were both good Christian people. The first time we had sex, we didn't really have sex. It was just a lot of slippery back and forth. Felt good. Sure. Second time, I actually went in, and we both had this look in our faces like, ooh, that's sex. Life pro tip: practice a little before making a lifelong commitment. Please subscribe if you liked the video, it really helps the channel to grow.